Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the body of Chapter 13. In this chapter, we'll continue working with the Your Name Service Merchandising Company. We'll start by setting up a few important details, including customer terms and sales tax defaults, and then we'll add several customers to the system. After that, we'll begin a series of customer transactions. We'll start with a sale of goods on account, then we'll record a sale of services on account, followed by a sales return from a customer. We'll record several receipts of payment on invoices and finish by entering a cash sale. Once we've recorded all those transactions, we'll run several reports: the sales journal, the cash receipts journal, customer ledgers, and the general ledger trial balance to see how everything we entered is reflected in the accounting records. At the end of the chapter, you'll have the opportunity to practice these same steps on your own using the Your Name Sales and Service Company. So let's get started by setting up the customer defaults in Sage. And first I need to log into the correct company. So if you're using one of the virtual machines, you're going to go to File and then Restore and then browse for your backup from Chapter 12 for the Service Merchandise Company. But if you're using your own computer or maybe one of the loaner laptops, you're going to click on Open an Existing Company to get started, and then you're going to find your company in the list here. So I'm looking for the Service Merchandise, the one with the most recent date and timestamp. Click OK, and we will open that up. To make sure that we're on track from where we ended in Chapter 12 with this company, we can run our General Ledger report real quick. So if I click Reports and Forms and then select the General Ledger category there, I want to run my General Ledger Trial Balance report. And first thing to look at is the totals here. Make sure that yours match up with my book, and then do make sure that all the details for all the different account balances match up as well. So if you're seeing the same balances, you're good to go with Chapter 13. So Chapter 13 again is focused on customers and sales. So on the navigational menu, that's what we want to select. And the first thing we're going to do is set up some customer defaults. So to do that, we click on the Customer and Sales Task button and then select Set up Customer Defaults. So for the standard terms, we're going to make sure that we have selected due in number of days, and then we're going to specify the number of days to be the net is due in 30 days. The credit limit is going to be $2,500. We're going to make sure that the system notifies us if a customer goes over that limit. And then we're not going to provide discount terms for now, so we're going to leave those as zeros there. For the mapping of our accounts, we want to make sure that the General Ledger sales account that is defaulting is going to be the sales hardware account, account number 40,000. If you need to change it, you can click on the magnifying lens. And then for the discount General Ledger account, we want to make sure that's set to sales discounts, account number 49,000. Finally, the cash account, we want that to default to Interstate Bank. Once your details match up, click the OK button to save. Next, we're going to set up sales tax within Sage, and to do that, from the customers and sales area, we're going to click on the sales tax button. And it brings up this helpful wizard that's going to guide us through the steps. So on the first step here, what would you like to do? We'd like to set up a new sales tax, so we'll click Next. So we're setting the sales tax up for the state of Arizona, and per the book, the tax rate that we're going to specify here is going to be 8%. And then for the number of individual taxes that make up this total rate, we're going to leave that at 1. And then we'll hit Next. So here we're going to specify the agency as well as the state that we're setting up the sales tax for right now. So for the sales tax agency ID, we're going to type in AZ for Arizona and then click OK. For the tax agency name, we're going to type in Arizona Department of Revenue. For how our sales tax collected for this agency, we're going to select by single rate. We're going to put in the rate at 8% again, and then the account that we're going to use to track our liability to the state of Arizona is going to be account number 23,100, sales tax payable. And then we'll hit Next. On the next screen, we're going to enter some similar information for the sales tax ID. We'll type in AZ again. For the sales tax name, we'll call it Arizona Sales Tax. We can see our tax agency in the table here, and then we'll click Finish. If the business had to set up sales tax for additional states, we could go through this set of steps again, but we do not. However, we can view all of these details by clicking on the View button and then hitting Next. And then we see these tables which show the sales tax rates, the agency for which we are going to remit the sales tax to, and then the general ledger account number that's going to use to track that liability. And make sure all these details match up with mine, and once you have that set up, then you can close out of this wizard and then click finish. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to enter several customers into the system. So to do that, if you're on the Customers and Sales tab, you click on the Customers and Sales Tasks button, then select New Customer. The first new customer that we're entering is named Eileen Finney. This is described on pages 478 and 479. So we're going to type a bunch of details in about Eileen Finney. So when you're setting up Eileen Finney's customer record, make sure in the sales tax field here that you select the Arizona sales tax that we just set up, and then make sure that your general tab looks like this. And once it does, click on the sales info tab, and just make sure here that the general ledger sales account is mapped to account number 40,000, which is the sales for the hardware income account. Once that matches up, we're going to enter additional customers. So to save this one and move on to the next one, hit the Save and New button. And then the screen clears and you can go back to your General tab and enter your information about your next customer in your list, which is Betsy Bauman, described on page 480. Make sure your General tab matches up with mine, especially with respect to the sales tax. Make sure that's set to Arizona. Once this screen matches mine, click on Sales Info. And for the General Ledger sales account, make sure that this customer is mapped to 40,200, which is the sales for the wall. And once this is all set up, we're going to enter some additional customers. So to save this one and move on to the next, click Save and New. So the next customer is Denise Cobb. Denise's information is described on pages 480 and 481 of our book. Start on the General tab and enter all of that customer's information. So when we're setting up Denise Cobb for the sales tax, because Denise is located in the state of Florida, the book says do not select Arizona, just to leave this blank, and then it has a footnote and it says since this customer is out of state, there is no sales tax. But that was generally true when the textbook was written, but that's not always the case anymore. Since the Wayfair Supreme Court decision in 2018, that's a U.S. Supreme Court decision, many states now require businesses to collect sales tax on out-of-state sales if they meet certain economic thresholds. We won't go on into that here, but just keep in mind that sales tax rules have changed quite a bit since this material was first published. And if you're making sales to customers in out of state, you could potentially be responsible for collecting sales tax from those customers and then remitting it back to those different states. So once Denise Cobb's General Info tab matches up with mine there, I'm going to click on the Sales Info tab and make sure that the General Ledger sales account is mapped correctly. This should be mapping to account number 40,400, sales for the flooring. Once those details are good, we're going to click Save and New because we have an additional customer or two to enter. So our next customer is Judy Perrin. She's described on page 481 of the book. So I'm going to click on the General tab and enter all of the information about Judy here. So on this record, make sure that the sales tax is mapped to the state of Arizona there, and just compare all your details here, and then you can move on to the Sales Info tab. And here we're going to make sure that the General Ledger sales account is mapped to account 40,000, sales for hardware. And we're going to click Save and New because we have one more customer to enter into the system. So I'm going to click on the General tab, and then Peter Martin is our next customer. Peter is described on pages 481 and 482 of our book. For the General Info for Peter, make sure that the sales tax is mapped to Arizona. Compare all your details. Once they match, click on the Sales Info tab and make sure that the General Ledger sales account is mapped to 40,200, sales for wall. And now that is the last customer we have to enter, so I'm going to click Save, and then I'm going to close out of the Maintain Customers window. And then to view all those customers that we've entered into the system, we can click on the customers and sales tasks and then select view and edit customers. Here's a table with all those customers. It does look like I forgot to enter a type of customer for Denise Cobb, so I'm going to open that one up again by double clicking on it, and yep, I forgot to do that. So reviewing this detail in the book, this is our customer from Florida, and for the customer type, that's going to indicate Florida by typing FL, and then I'll hit save and close out of the window, and now that's refreshed and I can see all the customers have types. So just a confirmation of all the different customers in the system. If we ever had to add any contact information, we could do that easily here. So the next thing we're going to do is enter a series of transactions involving our customers. The first transaction is described on page 483, and it says that we're making a sale on account. So when we're recording sales with our customers, we want to make sure we're on the customers and sales area for the navigational menu. And a sale on account, a credit sale, that is going to involve a sales invoice. So I'm going to click on that button and then select new sales invoice. And the details are we're selling to Eileen Finney, that's our customer. So I'm going to find them in the customer ID. There they are. And the date of the sale per the book is January 7th. And the details here are that we're selling 2 doorknobs on account. So I'm going to type in the quantity at 2. Doorknobs are classified in our inventory as hardware, so I'll select that. And once I did that, the unit price auto-filled and the amount was auto-calculated by multiplying the quantity by that unit price. We should see a total, including sales tax here, of $324. We should also avoid printing the invoice, and we can just manually type in the invoice number. We're going to give this invoice number of 101, and then once your details match up with this one, we will save the transaction to post it. So next we're going to record a series of 3 credit sales of merchandise. Starting on page 487, we have the description of the first one, and this is a sale on account to Denise Cobb. So since it's a sale on credit, we're on the sales invoice screen still, and now we're going to select our customer, Denise Cobb. And the date of this transaction is also on January 7th. The details are that we sold a quantity of 4, and what we sold were some rolls of vinyl flooring. So for our inventory here, we're going to select 003 floor, and the amount that is calculated here is $640. Now, because this customer is out of state and apparently we don't have enough economic nexus in that state to be responsible for collecting the sales tax, we should see a total net due of $640 there. The invoice is auto-filled with the number 102, and if your details match up with mine, we're going to save this transaction and move on to our next one, which is described on page 488 of the book. This is also a sale on account. Since a credit sale, we're still on the sales invoice area. This sale is to Peter Martin, so we find them in our list of customers. The date of the sale is still January 7th, so we don't need to change that. The invoice number is auto-filled. What's going on here is we sold a quantity of 4, so we'll type that in. And what we sold in this case were curtains. So we look at our inventory list, and those are wall coverings. So we're going to select 002 wall. The unit price is auto-filled and the amount auto-calculated. We should see a total here, including the sales tax, of $432. If your details match up, we'll click Save and move on to our next transaction, which is described on page 489. It's another sale on credit, so we're still in the Sales Invoice tab, and in this case, we're selling to our customer Judy Perrin, so we find them in the list here. And the date of the transaction still January 7th. The invoice number is auto-filled. What's going on here is we're selling a quantity of 3, so we'll type that in. And what are we selling? We're selling curtain rods. So we go here to our drop-down list, and per the book, curtain rods are classified as hardware, so we select that. The unit price auto-filled and the amount auto-calculated. You should see a total here, including sales tax, of $486. Even if your details match up, click the Save button to post the transaction. That's the last credit sale of goods that we're going to record right now. But now we're moving on to page 490, and it looks like our business is providing a service on credit for our customer. So because we're providing a service on credit, we're still on the sales invoice tab. We use the sales invoice anytime we're doing a sale on credit, whether it's goods or services. So we're still on that tab, and we're performing this service for our customer named Betsy Bauman. So we go down to our customer list here, find Betsy, there they are, and per the book, this transaction's happening on January 10th. So for the invoice date, we'll select that. But we have a problem here because we can't enter the general ledger account number in the apply to sales tab. It's just not showing up as one of our column headings. So we need to change the layout of this invoice a moment. So we're going to click on layout, and we're going to see here that there's a check mark next to predefined product. We're going to switch this over to predefined service. And now the column headers on the sales tab have changed. So we're going to select our general ledger account number, but it's still not there. And that makes me think that I need to go to my global settings a minute. So I'm going to do that. You may have to do this as well. So go to options and then global. And then in the accounting tab, we have a section that's labeled hide general ledger accounts. And we do have a couple of checkboxes here. So I'm going to uncheck those. And then I'm going to click the OK button. Go back to that sales invoice, and because it was open when I made that settings change, it didn't refresh, so I'm just going to close out of a minute, and I'm not going to save the transaction. So I'm going to go back into the sales invoice and select new sales invoice, and make sure the layout is still showing predefined service. So if we're going back and forth between selling services or selling products, you may have to go back and forth and switch these layouts. But now that we've made that settings change, I do see the general ledger account number showing on the screen here. So we're good to go with this with recording this transaction. So once again, the customer here was Betsy Bauman. The date of the event was January 10th, and what we did here is we repaired some curtains for Betsy. So for our general ledger account number, we are going to select account number 40,600 service fees. The amount that we are charging them before tax is $49.89. The tax field should be set to 1, which indicates that taxable, including tax. The total here that you should see on your screen should be $53.88. And then we're going to write a description here. I'd probably be a little more descriptive than the book there, but it just says to type in the word repair. But I'd probably want more detail about what was repaired there. Some curtains. And lastly, we don't need to print this off, so we're just going to manually type the invoice number per the book. That's invoice 105. And once your details match up with this one, click on the Save button to record the event. So that's the last credit sale that we're going to be recording for a moment. So I'm going to close out of the sales invoicing window. And our next transaction is a customer return described on page 493. So to record that, make sure you're on the Customer and Sales tab, and then select Credit and Returns, New Credit Memo. The customer that's returning is Peter Martin, so we're going to select them. Once we did that, the Apply to Invoice tab became active because we have an open invoice with this customer. So we're going to select that invoice. It's invoice 103. The date of this return is January 14th, so we're going to select that. They did give us a reference number. It's CM for credit memo 103. And then the details here, once we selected that invoice, populated with what was on the invoice was a quantity of 4 wall coverings, and Peter is returning 1 of them. So we're going to type in that quantity of 1 under the return column there. And once we do that, the amount should fill in at $100, and then after tax, the total that we should see at the bottom here is $108. So to post this transaction to the system, we click Save, and then we're going to close out of the window. And then Peter is paying us. We're collecting money from Peter. So we're on the Customers and Sales area again. We're going to click on the Receive Money button, and then select Receive Money from a Customer. I'm going to make sure that we're mapping this transaction to our Interstate Bank account, and then click OK. And then we have some details about this transaction. So it looks like the transaction is occurring on January 14th. So I'm going to select that date. And then for the deposit ID, I'm going to type in that date as well. For the check reference number, we're going to type in the invoice that we're collecting on, which is invoice 103. Then we're going to select the customer here, and we're collecting from Peter Martin. And once we selected Peter, we can see that the Apply to Invoices tab became active, and we can see that open invoice here. After the return, they owe us $324. They are paying that in full, so we're going to check that box. Once we check that box, the receipt amount shows up at $324. And make sure all your details match up here, and then once they do, click the Save button to post the transaction. So now we're going to record a series of receipt of payment from our customer on invoices. So for each of those, we're going to stay on this receive money window, and the first one we're going to do now is described on page 496, and the date of the transaction is January 21st. So we'll enter that for the date as well as the deposit ticket ID. We're going to write invoice 101 for the checker reference number. Per the book, we're collecting from Eileen, so we're going to select them from the drop-down customer list. Once we did that, the Apply to Invoice tab becomes active. We can see that open invoice from Eileen, and we're going to check the box next to it. The receipt amount is going to autofill at $324 even, and once your details match up with mine, click the Save button to post the transaction. So the next receipt of payment on account is described on page 497. We're receiving money from Judy Perrin on January 23, so we'll select the date, and then we'll type the date in for the deposit ticket ID. For the check reference number, we're collecting on invoice number 104, and then we're going to select the customer from the drop-down list. It's Judy Perrin. The Apply to Invoice tab became active. We can see the open invoice. We're going to check the box. The receipt amount will autofill. It should show $486 here. But the thing here is that Judy is not paying us in full. Even though the amount due is $486, that is not what she is paying us today. Per the book, she's paying us $105. So we're going to click in that cell and then change the amount. And once we do that, the amount up top here for receipt amounts changed as well. And now we can just save the transaction to post it. So on page 498, we collected from Betsy Bauman on January 28th. So we'll enter the date in both the date field as well as the deposit ticket ID. We're collecting on invoice 105, so we'll put that in for the checker reference number. Then we'll select the customer from the drop-down list. We're collecting from Betsy Bauman. The Apply to Invoice tab became active. We'll check the box next to that invoice. We're collecting in full from this customer, so we're not going to modify the amount. Receipt amount matches that, and if all your details match up, we'll save the transaction and move on to the final one on page 498. We're receiving money from Denise Cobb on January 28th. So I'm going to enter the date for the deposit ticket ID again. We're collecting on invoice 102, so I'll enter that for the checker reference number. Then we'll select our customer from the drop-down list. It's Denise Cobb. The Apply to Invoice tab became active. I see that open invoice. I'm going to check the box next to it. We are collecting from them in full, so we'll leave the amount as is. The receipt amount shows up here at $640 even. And check all these details, and if they match up, we'll click Save to post the transaction. And that's the last collection on credit that we're going to record for right now. Now we're going to move into a cash sale for the first time. So a cash sale, we're still going to work from the receive money window because we're still receiving money from our customer. It's just going to be recorded a little differently. So the details of this transaction are described on page 499. And this transaction's happening on January 30th, so we'll start with that. We'll also enter that for the deposit ticket ID, so no difference there. For the checker reference number, though, we're going to type the word cash. The customer we're selling to, we do know their name. A lot of times in a retail environment, if you're making a cash sale, you won't know the customer's name. But in this case, we do, so we can enter it in the name. Now, that customer, her name is Bertha Perkins, is not in the system. We don't need to add them today. I guess if we were doing a lot of business, we might want to, so that maybe we could run promotions to them and stuff like that. But for right now, we're just going to type their name into this name field. And then we are going to enter the quantity that they're purchasing from us, which is 2, and what they're purchasing are curtains. So for the item, we're going to select 002 wall. And then the amount, has auto-calculated at $200 even, and the transaction is showing up as taxable, but the tax is not yet being applied. So in this field that says sales tax, we're going to click on that magnifying lens, and then we'll select Arizona, and then we do see the sales tax showing up now at $16, and the receipt amount up top includes the sales tax, so you should match up with $216. For a cash sale that's taxable, we've got a couple of additional steps here. We got to make sure that the checker reference number matches this with the word cash, and then we are going to have to manually come down here and make sure that the sales tax is applied by selecting the state of Arizona. So watch out for that if you have to record any additional ones, especially in the exercises. So once these details match up with your screen, click the Save button, and then I'm going to close out of the window. Now, so the text starting on page 500 talks about all these different forms and letters that are built into Sage related to our customers. And to access those, if you click on Customers and Sales Tasks, you can select Write Letters to Customers, and then you have these different categories of different forms or letters that you could send to them possibly. So by default, it looks like the customer labels and letters category selected, and here's a bunch of different letters or forms that populate. So you can see we have some letters that we could send to them if they were overdue on the bill that they owe us. So take a look at these, read that section in the text. We're not going to be printing anything off, but it's sort of a neat feature. A lot of general ledger software such as Sage includes this kind of correspondence with the customer. So to reflect on the transactions that we've recorded in this chapter, we are now going to run several reports. So to get to these reports, we're going to click on the Reports and Forms drop down, and then we're going to select Account Receivable as our category. And the first one we're going to look at is going to be our sales journal. So the sales journal is going to show all the credit sales that were made during the period and the journal entries that are behind them. So take a look at the screen here and make sure that it matches up with yours. If it does, create a PDF of it, make sure that you save it in a location that's easy to find, and give it an appropriate name per the book as well as per canvas. You're going to submit this one to me. So the next report that we're going to run is going to be our cash receipts journal. So going back to the report chooser here, it's also in the accounts receivable category. And here it is right here, the cash receipts journal. So the cash receipts journal is going to show us all of the transactions in which the business received cash during the period. So take a look at the screen here and make sure that your details match up with mine. And if they do, make a PDF, save it to a location that's easy to find, give it an appropriate name. You're going to submit this one as well. And then the next report that we're going to be running is going to be our customer ledgers report. That is also in the accounts receivable category. And the customer ledgers report is basically a report that shows our subsidiary accounts receivable. So it shows all the individual account receivable from all the different customers, so all the activity from those customers during the period of time, as well as a running balance for each customer's account receivable. And if we summed up the ending balances for all these individual account receivables, that total would match up with the balance of our account receivables. So we can see only one customer owes us at the end of the period. It's Judy Perrin. Her balance is $381. And if we were to have this screen for a minute and go back to our ledger reports, we can see our trial balance is going to show the same balance for account receivable there, $381. That's just coming from Judy's account. But if we had multiple customers with open balances, they would sum to this total balance. This is the control account for all the accounts receivable. The customer ledgers report is showing the individual account receivable balances. So compare these details against mine, and if they match up, make a PDF of it and submit it to me with an appropriate name. And then finally, we're going to run one more report that's going to reflect all the activity from chapter 12 and 13, and that's going to be that general ledger trial balance report. So if you open that up again, your totals here should match up with mine, as well as all the details. If they do, save a PDF and submit it with an appropriate name on Canvas. So now that we've reached the end of chapter 13, it's a great idea to do a backup of our company file just in case we have any major problems down the road. So go to File and then Backup, and make sure that you either save it to the J drive if you're using the virtual environment, or if you're using your own machine or a loaner laptop, save it to a file location that's easy for you to locate in case you ever need that backup file. Once you're done with that, then you're ready to move on to the end of chapter exercises. You're going to be switching companies, so make sure you do that. File, Close Company, and then you're going to switch over to the Your Name Sales and Service Company next.